All right. Welcome to the midnight showing of Forza Exploration. Random discussions of really cool stuff that I love learning about at any point in my life, no matter what I do for work, no matter what time it is, and no matter if I'm on my way home from working in the middle of the night like I am right now. So today, talking about Laos, the country. So in my family, with my kids and my wife and my two pups, we love watching this archaeologist slash explorer slash TV guy named Josh Gates. He's pretty dope. And there's a show he has called Expedition Unknown that we have literally watched every single episode like 1 million times. So he just came out with a new episode that we watched tonight before I went into work. And been watching these shows with my kids for a long time. And we love them. And I'm brainwashing my kids to love history and archaeology and folklore and mythology and ancient peoples and cultures and languages because they're so good. Way better than a lot of the modern stuff that I'm just like, yawn. Anyway, so the topic today, the episode today that he had was about the death jars of Laos, is what I think the title of the episode was. But freaking cool. Okay, so I have traveled around the world a decent amount, some for fun, some as the most and only enjoyable kind of part of serving in the United States Navy. And so while in the Navy, at one point we stopped in Southeast Asia. We stopped in Thailand, but Laos is pretty freaking close to Thailand. So same flavor, same, different place. So Laos, it is surrounded by 5 countries in Southeast Asia. I believe it is surrounded by China, Cambodia, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. And really freaking cool. So what this episode was about was this archaeologist, Josh Gates, was working with this Australian archaeologist. Sorry, dude, can't remember your name. And archaeologist from Laos, to try to get more information about these really, really weird, mysterious stone jars. And what I mean by jars is not mason jars or little cool ceremonial jars in pyramids in Egypt or anything like that. No, these things were literally carved out of giant chunks of sandstone from a mountain. And there are sites with these stone jars, some of them as tall as 10 feet tall, hollowed out inside. And there's known at over 2,000 of these. And there's sites all over the place in Laos where there's clusters of these jars. And no one knows where they're from. There's all these kind of theories. There's theories of giants who made these jars. There's theories of some king was on this conquest, and after they won a battle, he had all of his guys, all of his warriors carve these jars out of stone so they could make rice wine out of them and get plastered. There's theories that that's what they buried their dead in. But up until this point, no one really knows anything. And so the people who carved them, they don't know hardly anything about them, but they call them the jar people. So Josh is going through, and he's talking to this archaeologist, and they are going through a few different of the sites of these jars. Whew. Sorry, it's like 5:05 in the morning. I just finished cleaning some banks. So, first stop they go, he's walking through, and there's over 300 of these jars of various shapes and sizes deposited just in this field. And he's like, dude, okay, so what do we know about these jars? And they're talking about them, and he's like, okay, do these jars have lids? That would be interesting, because that might help us know if they're trying to store stuff in them, like food or bodies or something. And this Australian archaeologist is like, dude, freaking don't know. We haven't found any lids, so don't know. Okay, well, who made them? Also, don't know. We have a theory that it was probably around the Iron Age. So that is, in archaeological terms, about 500 BC to 500 CE. CE, if you're unfamiliar, is in academia and archaeology what they say instead of AD. So CE stands for Common Era, and BCE is before Common Era. So I'm just going to use those terms because it makes more sense to me based on stuff I've studied, schooling, etc. So 500 BCE to 500 CE, about 1,000-year span, they think the jar people may have existed. But they don't know anything about them. So like, cool, Iron Age, that's dope. So they're looking at these, they're digging out some stuff, and then he's like, okay, Josh, I have an active site in the jungle, let's go check it out. And so they go through the jungle, and this is a jungle full of unexploded ordnance from the CIA carpet bombing Laos during the Vietnam War. So you got to be freaking careful or you're going to die. And side note, that's one thing that chaps my hide about wars, is we have some incredibly rare, amazing, fragile, just critically important to humankind locations around the world that have been damaged, and who knows how many have been destroyed because of all these petty, stupid wars we've done, especially the ones we started having bombs. Anyway, super dumb. Yes, I served in the military, but I am not one of those veterans who's like, hoo-yah, let's go blow shit up. So, anyway. So they go into the jungle, and he's checking out this active dig site of these jars. And they find one that is about 6 feet tall, and Josh climbs in it, and they drain a bunch of water that's deposited inside of it, and then they start scraping soil, and from the bottom, sediment, and they find beads. Cool thing about beads, you may not be able to date them because they're not biological, so you can't use carbon dating. However, you can date them based on their relation to certain time periods. So, for example, in modern times, if you find a crisp, untouched Sega Genesis in a time capsule somewhere, 1,000 years from now, people would be like, oh, this is probably from when Sega Genesis was first released. So this era of like 1980, 1990s kind of a thing, right? Like general time frame. All you nerds, like, you're going to correct me and say, well, actually, Sega Genesis was released on this date, on this year. You get what I'm saying. You can't be that precise in archaeology. So, they get these beads. And guess what? One of the beads is very, very similar to beads that are from other ancient cultures within that 5-country region. So he's like, dope. That puts us right in the ballpark. That's awesome. It's like an orangish bead made of stone, I think. So then they find this other bead, and bro, you don't even know how cool this is. It's like, it's this blue, almost like turquoise sapphire-ish color, but like more transparent. It's freaking dope, and looks like it's brand spanking new, which is one thing I love about stones compared to man-made crap nowadays. Well, the archaeologist from Australia is like, Josh, hold the phone, man. This bead is from one region, what is now modern-day Iran. It's from this empire. I'm trying to remember what the empire was called. I think it was like the Sasapian Empire, but don't quote me on that. But it was ancient Iran. This was a very particular type of bead that was used in trade during that time. And that puts them at about I think it said like 1200 CE. So, or sorry, not 1200. 1200 years ago. So 800 CE. So a little bit later than their original dates they were estimating. And to give you some context, the Viking Age in Scandinavia started roughly 800 CE. So when the Viking Age first starts and the Vikings go and raid Lindisfarne Monastery in northern England, northeastern England, same about time period as this ancient Middle Eastern empire made these cool blue beads. Okay? So they find this bead in there and they're like, oh, wait a minute. So people were using this probably about 1200 years ago. Okay, cool. We got a time frame. Dope. FYI, in archaeology, so many things are dated based on their relation to other things, right? So their estimate is, okay, this bead is very unique from a certain time period. Yes, there's always the possibility that someone could have put it there later on. But given the remoteness of this dig site in the middle of the jungle in Laos, it's not very likely. So, there's a lot of estimation, probability kind of things that go into making educated statements or guesses when archaeology and anthropology come into play. So he's like, dude, okay, we got a ballpark 1200-ish years ago is when the Jar people were doing this stuff. Awesome. Okay, now, guess what? We just found out that there is a elder from, I think, the Khmer people who said, hey guys, he sent word that he thinks they might have stumbled across another jar site. And this is an indigenous people, one of their elders, and but it's important to him because it's part of their culture, their history, right? So they go and interact with this elder, eat some crazy food like banana rats, drink some crazy rice wine, and get the blessing to go into the jungle to this place. So they're going through, trying to not get blown up by unexploded ordnance, and then they find this undiscovered site up until this point of these stone jars. And they're like, holy frick. They make sure there's no unexploded ordnance around any of it because they don't want to freaking die. And then they set up a dig site. When you set up a dig site in archaeology, You set up a grid so that you can take pictures in relation to, how big the grid is. You can use that to figure out, okay, this thing was found, at this quadrant of the grid, like 5 inches in from the left, east side, and 25 inches down from the north side of it, or whatever, right? That's important because, like I said, where things are found, the dating and the context and all that stuff is really important and is based on where it is found in relation to other things, right? Finding a burial where there is a gorgeous sword right next to the body versus 20 feet away from the body tell you different things, right? So anyway, they set up this grid and they start digging very carefully. And so they're digging and they stumble across this round kind of stone next to the stone jar that they're looking at. So they carefully clean around it. And they're like, dude, this looks like a carved piece of stone that might be a lid. So they take some pictures, document it, everything you got to do in good, solid archaeology. And then they pick it up. And they try to fit it into the stone jar. And it freaking fits. So cool. So they're like, in the history of everything we've ever known about these stone jars for the last 100+ years, of all the archaeologists checking these out, no one has found a stone that fits and is legit a lid. And this one is like, this stone jar got tipped over, so now it's horizontal, and the lid fell off. And has been sitting there for who knows how long. 1,200 years maybe. And they put it on and it fits. So, boom! Already, they're like, cool! Piece to the puzzle we didn't have. Jars have lids. At least some of them. Probably all did. Okay, now what? Now what do we do from there? Digging. Whoa! What's that thing? It looks round. Oh, weird. It's concave. I don't think it's a lid. What would that thing be? Consistent with indigenous cultures across the world, including Mesoamerica, including Africa, and including Southeast Asia, the people often had carved concaved, meaning it didn't round like, freaking how a pancake bulges out, but the edge of this disc goes in all the way around. Okay? These peoples have basically earplugs. And what I mean by earplugs, can't remember what these guys call them. Ear discs. You pierce your ears, and you got these like homies in America, skater dudes, whatever the heck, and they gauge their ears bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they put these like circles in them, and so he's just like chilling with a big old like 1-inch disc in his ear. Well, people have been doing that indigenously for a long freaking time, like thousands of years. And guess what? Josh Gates and this other archaeologist found one. And it was like, it looked like it was freaking like 4 inches in diameter. So that's a gnarly, huge ear disc. And probably heavy. So, crazy. So now, boom, another piece to the puzzle of who the crap the jar people were. Well, it looks like they probably practiced putting ear discs in to stretch their ears out as a form of adornment, maybe spiritual practice, stuff like that. Cool. Now we're starting to get a picture of who these people might be. One of the jars had some remains in there. So they used AI and this digital mapping technology to take pictures of all these bone fragments, and they were able to actually piece it all together digitally into what the skull would have looked like if it wasn't smashed. The mandible was actually in decent shape, and it had teeth missing in perfect spots, not just like random, which is consistent with teeth ablation, which people in Southeast Asia practiced up until about 100 years ago, where they would take out certain teeth on purpose to differentiate different tribes. Okay? So people in one tribe would take out, like, their freaking canines and then their two middle bottom teeth, or, and then the next tribe would take out a couple molars and then maybe the front teeth. Like, so these teeth had teeth ablation happen to them. And so like, oh, frick. So anyway, they map this skull and they're like, dude, this is gnarly. This is telling us so much. And then they use digital stuff to, now that they have a full skull digitally, I said digitally so many times, sorry. You can reconstruct the face. And they reconstructed it to see what this guy probably looked like. I think they were able to tell through forensic anthropology is basically what it is, which is how you look at skeletons to be able to tell, like in the show Bones, they're like, ooh, this was like a 15-year-old girl, and just based on the teeth. Like, that's an anthropology thing. And so archaeologists and anthropologists do that all the time out in the field. And so I think they're able to figure out, based on the bones they found, that it was a male. So then they do this digital facial mapping, reconstruction, and it shows this dude. And they put the ear discs in there too, the teeth ablation, and it was like, holy crap. For the first time in thousands of years, we might have an idea of what the jar people looked like. At least their heads. Fascinating. So freaking cool. And like, some of these things were like, the find happened on the show, which is freaking cool. Just blows my mind. I would love to be part of that kind of stuff. First one to find certain things. Not like, I don't give a crap about like the getting famous part or any of that. Just the fact that, like, touching something that no one has touched for 1,000 years makes me emotional. Like, how freaking cool is that you get to connect with something that someone else held or used or treasured, or even, like an actual person, like their bones or something like that have not seen the light of day for thousands of years, and you're the first person to, like, that's so cool. I would literally die. So anyway, super cool episode. Gotta check it out. I know this explanation is like half the length of the freaking episode, but so cool. Now I want to dig into these the jar people and the jars, these stone jars of Laos, and learn more about that, because it just sounds dope. So anyway, hope you enjoyed my midnight brain dump of really cool freaking history stuff about Laos. And Josh Gates, if you ever watch this, you're the man. I want to be you when I grow up. All right, peace.